Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two amazingly multi-talented and accomplished music people whom I have pursued as guests for quite some time. Great things come to those who wait, and I promise you will leave smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. And in this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. Also, and this is very important, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not do this for free. Special thanks to MedJet, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and Better Than Booze. I also want to call out a new partnership between my platform and one that you should really pay close attention to. My pal Lars Murray produces a daily podcast called Unlimited Supply, and if you work anywhere in the music business, this should be a part of your daily routine. It is a quick hit, 7-minute long summary of the most important stories impacting our business. Trust me, you will be the smartest person in any room you enter if you make that part of your daily routine. Catch it on any platform where you currently consume podcasts. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat is Daniel Rowland. Daniel is a unique combination of music producer, audio engineer, tech executive, and educator. In addition to 15 plus billion streams, that's with a B, guys, of the music he has helped created, Daniel is head of strategy and partnerships at Lander Audio, is co-founder of online digital audio workstation Audio Tool, and longtime recording industry instructor at MTSU. For nearly a decade, his primary focus has been on the empowerment of music creators via ethical AI-driven tools and accessible design. As a creative, he's produced and mixed and mastered projects for Adrian Belew, Jason Derulo, Seal, Philip Glass, Keith Richards, Gwen Stefani, and Nine Inch Nails, David Foster, Burna Boy, Nina Simone, and many others, along with dozens of soundtracks for Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, John Wick, and Fast and Furious. Daniel is ranked as one of the top 40 mastering engineers in the world by JAXTA and is a voting member of the Recording Academy. Daniel, it is such an honor to have you with me today, brother. I'm so
What is
glad
going on?
we agreed to do this.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me, obviously.
And joining Daniel is the incomparably talented Adrian Belew. Adrian is a multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, producer, and guitar guru. Adrian has released 20 critically acclaimed solo records and was the frontman, singer, and co-writer and guitarist for prog rock powerhouse King Crimson for 30 years. He's also played along musicians such as David Bowie, Frank Zappa, Paul Simon, Nine Inch Nails, Tom Tom Club, and Talking Heads. Known for his inventive guitar sounds, Adrian mixed his unique sound, complex time signatures, witty lyrics, wild sound, and technical mastery into several app creations, Flux.fx and Flux by Belew. He is currently on tour with Danny Carey, Tony Levin, and Steve Vai, playing a creative reinterpretation of 3 of iconic 80s King Crimson albums. It is my pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform. Take it away, boys.
Amazing.
All right.
Again, thank you again, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what's up, everybody? So good to meet everyone. Thank you all for chiming in. We're keeping an eye on the chat too. So if things kind of come up over the course of what is going to be just a conversation between Adrian and myself, we'll try to get to some of that. So feel free to chime in. So just real quickly, as Tom said, he's been, I've been looking, I'm a fan of this podcast and I'm super excited to be on. And when Tom asked me, who I would want to be on with, Adrian is obviously the first person that came to mind. And not so much for this to be about my career, because it's not, but to be kind of about where our careers overlapped and what came out of that. I mean, just so I can thank Adrian, because he was my portal into the music industry. But I think some things that you may or may not be aware of that came out of that, and I think really were harbingers of what's happening in the music industry now. So we're going to talk through just a little bit of some of the interesting stuff we did, both with on the app development side of things, the ideas Adrian had, some work we did with Pixar, and then kind of where that's led us now. And we'll talk about in a more modern context, what's happening in the industry with AI and direct to fan and remixing and all that stuff, and where that could potentially be going. So Aid, thank you, man, for agreeing to do this.
I'm so happy to do this. It's great to see you. And I love talking to you. I always learn something from you.
Oh shit, ditto, obviously, man. So just kind of set the table for everybody. So about how Adrian and I met, right? So we'll kind of start with that. So I was a guy in his apartment in Hermitage, Tennessee, kind of tinkering around with guitar effects and Ableton, and I was kind of just, my shtick was to be an expert in music technology and know everything, but I hadn't really applied it to a lot of music because I didn't know anybody as crazy as I was, or crazier than I was, that cared about any of that stuff. And I was teaching at a college, and a mutual friend of Adrian's and myself, Saul Zonana, called the college one day and said, "Hey, I'd love to come teach at the college, or I'm actually the audio engineer for Adrian Belew if you want to bring any students by." So I gathered up some students, and we trotted out to Adrian's studio in Mount Juliet, where he is now, the same studio he's in now. And that was where we first met. And at the time, Adrian, I think you were working on the album if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was awesome.
I recorded with my trio, which is a rarity. I usually record everything myself on solo records, but it's a monster piece, 43 minutes long, as you remember.
Yeah, it was amazing. Obviously, an amazing piece of work. And at that point, we weren't working together. I was just a fly on the wall, right? And I remember at that time you had this monstrous guitar rig. I remember you being on your swooper, pedal, and like you almost had a 360-degree pedals and synthesizers and stuff around you. I was just like, oh my God, I'm a kid in the candy store when I saw that.
Yeah, it was a bit much. I had to grow another leg.
Well, touring, that's how we initially met. Is you would ask me, hey, it seems like you're into this stuff. Is there any way we could downsize this? So I wasn't originally co-producing with you or even your audio engineer. It was like, how can we make this smaller so I remember your whole mission was I want to have all my sounds, but I want to carry this on an airplane. And that was how we kind of kicked things off, man, was the grand multi-year quest of shrinking your guitar system.
Well, and I learned so much, man, when you did that. There were so many things, so many possibilities, and you really narrowed it down to the ones that we could actually do. And almost the same rig is part of what I carry now with Beat.
Yeah, it's wild that's still a thing. And I had no idea what I was doing, right? I was wildly underqualified to be doing any of that stuff. So good. Just, I know I've got some students of mine, they're on the podcast listening in, and it's like, yeah, I was, I'm my whole motto is dig a hole, crawl in it, and figure out how to climb out. And Adrian was definitely that. There's no reason I should have been working with you at that time, but I was faking it until eventually. I'm still faking it, I think, but it's certainly worked out. So that's how
I'll never tell.
Yeah, thanks. We're busted now, I think. So we kind of started doing that together, and then eventually, you wanted to upgrade your studio, so we did that. You had a big, I think, Neotech console in there back in the day, and that came out, and I, helped, design. You guys had a budget, and we helped design the studio and kind of shrink it down. And we'll see some video of that here later on, guys. Everybody here, I'm going to play you a couple of really short videos that show some of the projects Adrian and I worked on, and you'll get to see the studio sort of in action and him playing and stuff. So it's going to be very cool. So as we kind of did this, and for me, I'd never been out of the country. Again, guys, I had done nothing, and we went to Amsterdam for 3 weeks, and Adrian performed performed E with an orchestra, which was insane, and recorded it and all of that stuff, which was for you. I mean, you travel all the time, but for me, I was brand new. But we had a blast. We lived in the same apartment together in Amsterdam, and ran around and acted like 5-year-olds.
One of those canals, and it was a gorgeous time to be there.
Yeah, man,
that was a pretty hairy thing. If I have to think about my whole career, preparing to play with an orchestra, I don't read music, and they all did, is probably the scariest thing I ever did. And just if I can interject a quick story, the gear that you had put together for me was
this is funny.
crucial to my being able to make that performance. I could not play without that gear. And we went into Paradiso, the beautiful church that we were playing at, that was sold out for people around the world, and to do a sound check. And I was tuning the guitar and I looked down and there was a little bit of smoke pouring out of the rack. I thought I was going to die. And I, said, typical to Dan, you said, no worries, just go back to the dressing room. 5 minutes later, he told me it's all fixed. And I almost had a heart attack.
Yeah, you almost had a heart attack. Yeah, I almost had a heart attack that, and while you were performing the whole thing, right? I was probably, it's kind of like, not that this isn't direct relation, but it's, watching your kid do something like performing, you're probably more nervous than if you were doing it. I was just like, because it was you're performing in front of an orchestra for the first time, like the most incredibly complicated music that the orchestra could barely play.
Yeah.
And it was just
exactly right. I wrote the most complicated stuff. And
anyway,
you can see me in the video. There's a nice DVD of it. At the very end, I jump off my stool, and it's not because I'm so happy. It's because I'm relieved that it's done.
Yeah,
that was good. Anything. Go ahead.
No, that was amazing, man. And it was, for me, it was just like, yeah.
We've had really some great highlights. We're talking about all of them on this show.
Yeah, man. So that was kind of the first thing that, for me, we did together. And then that album came out, and I think I even mastered that album, which was crazy because I was so early and I don't even want to listen. I'm sure it sounds great, but I'm nervous. I would be nervous to listen to it now, 10 or 12 years after.
No, it does sound great. Yeah, it stands the test.
Yeah, man. So yeah, the kind of starting down that path, and Adrian, as getting to be kind of the tech arm of what you do, bringing in kind of all the new software and all the new stuff and filtering that and kind of presenting you things that you could then be creative with. Because I mean, it's kind of the history of your career is breaking. We'll talk more about this, but is finding, repurposing technology for things that wasn't necessarily meant for, right? And just thinking outside the box. You brought up this idea that I think you had thought about in the 70s with Zappa or something, about like music that never plays the same way twice, or can you put some context on that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was touring with David Bowie in Europe, 1978.
That's what it was.
We had a day off in Marseille, France. And so I walked down to the harbor near our hotel, and I was sitting outside. There was 2 different cafes behind me, and all kinds of things going on, activities and horns and boat sounds and just everything. People walking by talking in French, and different radio stations playing. And it suddenly occurred to me, I had like an epiphany that this is what music really is. It's life flowing by. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if you could make music like this? Because this thing would interrupt this thing, and then that would happen, and something else. And I thought it would be so great if you could kind of figure out a way to do that. Naturally, it was impossible at the time, and I thought about it for many, many years. And then when I met you, suddenly I thought, well, maybe I'll run this by Daniel. And I remember you looking at me like I was crazy. Yeah, I want to do music that is always changing, never repeats itself. Oh, okay. Yep. I got it. So we figured it out. You did. There was another character who came into the picture, and then we realized this is how we can do it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that other character here in a minute. Tom, so I'm going to kind of set the stage for what this is. I'm going to play a little video for you. Tom, I'm not sure if I have permission to share. For some reason, it's not allowing me to share audio on this. We're going to see if I can tweak that here, because I want to play something for you guys. So let's just see real quick, although I'm not sure this is actually going to work. So hang tight. I'm guessing you can't hear that.
I didn't hear it.
All right, cool. So let's try this one more time. We did a test of this, of course, before we started in today, and it worked all great. So we're going to try it one more time. But yeah, it's saying I don't have permission on the share sound. You can operate on that maybe and see what we can do.
Let me work on that while you keep going.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, so that effectively what comes out of that concept that Adrian came up with was, how can we do something, an album that first of all never plays the same way twice, right? Which was an interesting part of this. And also, that also incorporated like real life sounds, right? Sounds from nature and all the stuff that Adrian was super interested in. So that became, I know over the years, Adrian, you thought about, well, can I do that on a CD? Can I do that on, like, how are we going to go about doing this? The tech wasn't really there to pull it off. So eventually we kind of settled on this idea of using, doing it on via a mobile application, right? So that became this concept of Flux by Belew, which some of you may have heard of. And again, we'll see if we can get you a video of that here in a second. But the idea being that Adrian would record tons of music, right? And myself, was recording that and helping produce it. And David, there you go. You purchased it. That's awesome. And the idea would be that it wasn't just traditional, like 3-minute long songs, right? It was songs that, if it was a 3-minute long song, it was chopped up into different, you would get pieces of it, or it might be 10 versions of one song that has a different guitar solo, or it's just a piano version, or it's reinterpretations of various pieces of music. And you were getting them in a short form content, right? They were also kind of being remixed. Think about a lot of where the music industry is headed right now, where we're looking at short form content. You're looking at, remixing and alternate versions is a big thing that's in the AI space, which we'll talk about. Direct to fan. Adrian has always been the direct to fan guy, right? Really eschewing streaming services and going after that. Obviously, that's a huge thing. Now, this app, and again, we'll play the video if we can. It had responsive art inside of it, so it had interactive art that went along with the music, so you could save your own pieces of art. And here, I'll share even though the audio is not working for some reason, we'll go ahead and share this just so you can just see kind of what this looked like. We don't need to hear Adrian talk about it necessarily, but there it goes. So it's an app that, as you play it, we'll see here in a second, had like interactive art and different things. And that was a big deal for me, because I'd never thought about music in that way before, right? And it kind of, this idea of moving towards an active listening experience versus a passive listening experience. When you think about the way that you interact, a lot of people interact with Spotify, right? It's just kind of on in the background. It's not something that they're really clued in on, whereas Flux was presenting new music to you constantly, right? And it was in short snippets. And if you liked something, you needed to physically like it. Otherwise, it might never come back again, right? And you build playlists and cool stuff like that. So it was really predicated on this notion of interactivity and of active listening. So it was super, super ahead of its time in that regard. And anyway,
as a songwriter, been writing songs all my life. I was getting to the point with it where I thought it's kind of ridiculous to have a song where you've said what you want to say, and you've got that verse, and then you've got the chorus, and then you just kind of go back and try to say it 3 different times with 3 different choruses. And I was getting tired of that. I said, well, that was really meant for radio. It was a format they chose. And I thought, I'd like to have some song. Sometimes I write a song, and after the verse and the chorus, I think it's right where it should be. Stop. So that was part of the idea too. I remember listening to songs when I was a kid, and on the radio, they'd be like 1.5 minutes long. Like, I left my heart in San Francisco. That's it. We're done.
Yeah.
We got the visual yet? No?
No, I don't think it's, for some reason, Zoom is not behaving for us at the moment. That's okay.
Well, it was a great explanation, that video that you made. It was really wonderful. It showed you so much stuff. But
we'll get here in a minute. I may put you on talking about something in a minute, and I'll jump off and jump back on, and maybe it'll work then if there's an appropriate time for that.
Sure. But we'd like to get you guys to see that. It would be fun.
Yeah. So we'll get to that here in a second. But so this kind of became this project where we had, this new way to deliver music to people, right? Which was this direct to fan Flux album that never plays the same way twice, where literally anything could be a part of it. It can be non-musical content. It could be birds Adrian recorded in his backyard that come at you in little snippets, because everything is short, right? So it took me a while to wrap my brain around it, but when you see it in practice, it's actually very, very cool. Again, with the art and stuff like that. And the other side of that project was, well, it would be cool to have some kind of an app that would help us be more creative and create sounds that we'd never heard before and stuff like that. And that became the Flux or Flux Effects, which was an iOS application. Again, Adrian and myself were both really early in on the iPad on the music production side, right? So I spent thousands of dollars on every single hundreds of apps for music, and was really going through them and figuring out what I liked and didn't like. This is around the iPad 2, right after the iPad 1 came out. And the idea of multi-touch just seems so attractive for being able to manipulate sound, right? It's something we can't really do outside of with MIDI controllers and stuff on a traditional computer. And that's where this concept of Flux Effects came from. And yeah, I'll show you. I'll put up a picture here of it while we kind of figure out what's going on the other side of things. But it was a multi-page iOS app that allowed you to manipulate the sound. So you can see kind of a picture of it here, where it just had a whole ton, rows of effects up at the top, and you can enable them, drag them into these categories. You had, an XY pad to kind of control everything, and then multiple pages where you could go through and control, individual effects, right? So it ended up being just this very, very cool way to give, again, access and manipulate sound in different ways. A complete sequencer, a lot of randomization. I think one other thing I learned a lot from Adrian is, besides just kind of breaking and misusing technology to do stuff that, is outside of what you might normally hear, is the context, that randomization is good, right? Like, getting, whether it's for composition or just for different sounds, right? Anything that takes you out of kind of your normal frame of thinking and pushes you in a new direction is a good direction, however that's done. And that kind of led to, we'll talk at the end of this call about how that led into my work with Lander and on the AI side of things, about kind of making that sort of randomization a little bit more intelligent and a little bit more usable. And I kind of came out from a lot of the stuff that we had done kind of early days together. Anyways. And again, we'll come back to this and see if we can get this video running. But one story would be interesting for you to tell, because I always found this particularly impactful along the lines of what we just talked about. You've told this story before, I think, but when you were working on what became the Lodger album, right? Like, as far as like trying to get stuff out of technology or out of musicians that is new and different and not the patterns that we all fall into. Can you tell that story? Do you mind?
Well, the Lodger album was the first actual studio recording I ever did. It was with David Bowie, and it was in Switzerland. And Brian Eno was the producer. And Brian came up with this concept that they were going to call the record Planned Accidents. Now, that's not what they did, but Planned Accidents. So they had 20 songs already performed by the band. And when I came in the studio, they said, so here's what we want to do. We want you to put your headphones on upstairs. The studio is above the control room. Put your headphones on, you'll hear a count off, and start playing. And I'm like, wait a minute, can I hear the song first? No, you can't hear the song. What key is it? No, you can't do. They wanted to get my initial reactions. So that's what I did. Can you imagine? I would go up through 20 songs and I would play all the way through and try to figure out what to play while the music was playing to me for the first or second time ever. And then they would kind of come in later and take the parts that they thought worked and move them around and stuff. So they made a composite guitar track. And I had never known that was possible until that moment. But that was the beauty of what you can do with technology.
Yeah, that's wild, man. And like, so we that just kind of adopting that type of a mindset I thought was fascinating. And that kind of led, so we've done this kind of Flux effects thing, right? The effects processor. We've done Flux by Belew, right, which is this wild kind of crazy art project. And one of the interesting things about working with Adrian is that you're not just working with Adrian. Adrian has fans that are, because he plays some difficult music, right, and is kind of known for doing that and leveraging technology. A lot of people that are drawn to that music end up in fairly significant places in creative companies, right? So you have this fandom that are running some important companies. And I remember the day that Pixar kind of, I know there's this funny story that you had met them years and years ago, and they had given you like a business card or something, like early days when they had just started.
Yeah, I lost it, unfortunately. Yeah. I'm probably the biggest Pixar fan in the world, honestly. I have even all their books and everything. And they came to a show that King Crimson played at the Greek Theater in San Francisco and came backstage, and they were really happy to meet me. It was, they gave me their card and they were saying, we listened to your solo records while we were making Toy Story. I was shocked, And so I'm thinking, wow, I guess we'll work together. That's, And years and years went by. I never called them. I didn't have their number, and they just never called me. And then one time they called me and said, we see you're playing in San Francisco with your trio, and you guys have a day off. Can you come over and visit Pixar? So that was mind blowing. The first time going through Pixar is unbelievable. It's just so crazy. It's like its own museum as well as being, the center of all the creative and technical activity. And so that was just great. And we were walking around, there's a bridge that connects the two sides. One side is the artist, one side is the tech people, the bridge that connects them. It was Steve Jobs' way of getting them to be separate, but the only way they could get to the cereal in the morning was on the bottom floor. So everybody had to go down where the cereal was, and they mixed with each other. That was his plan. We were walking across the bridge, and they said, to each other, wouldn't it be great to have Adrian do a little something, with us? And I said, yes, it would be. Kind of, yes, that would be great. Let's do that. And eventually they had a director who was directing a short film. And he was once again playing some of my music as music to, work to. And so they found that out and they said, hey, well, we know Adrian, we can get him to do the music. And that's when Piper came in.
Yep. And I remember that was, I obviously, not obviously, but massive Disney fan. And, working on this project long. I've been with Disney now for 10 years, I've mastered thousands of tracks for Disney since Piper, but Piper was the biggest, craziest thing that I've probably ever done. And getting back to this concept of thinking outside the box, because Pixar is very much in that mindset as well, right? That's why they are who they are, obviously. And I remember one of the things that they requested that we do, which was again, one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to be involved with, was they said, why don't you, bring the guitar system out, right? And set the guitar system up in a room at Pixar, in the recording studio at Pixar. And also bring the music that you guys have been working on. And we want you to play that. And we want Adrian to play some of it live, right? And just kind of perform. And what we're going to do is set up a bunch of animators in a semicircle and have them like in an animation jam session, right? Like actually sketch what they feel from the music that they're hearing. And we're going to put that up on boards all around the room, and we're going to try to decipher a story from that, right? You remember that was so crazy.
Oh, it was amazing. And so we did play for them a lot of the Flux stuff, but then I would also play things too. And they were just going at it. And pretty soon the whole room was just full of these wonderful things. And then they started themselves jamming on these ideas like, well, what if we took this thing and we turned it into this kind of storyline and blah, blah, blah. And they really had a great time. I think there was two of the biggest directors there too. And
Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter were both there.
Those are the two guys that I always known. Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter are amazing, unbelievable people. And so that was fantastic. To get to be at that facility alone, it just mind blowing. And then we started, doing the movie. And it was interesting because it really took almost 3 years to do this film, which is a 6-minute film. Of course, we did other things. You didn't work on it every day. I was touring and doing other things, but then, and I think I came up with 2, maybe 3. I think it was 3 different score ideas, and we would produce them in the studio, and then they would tell us what they didn't like about them.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how that works. And welcome to the film music industry.
Meanwhile, you're getting all these updates on the story that they're working on, animation updates. And it never looked like Pixar until almost the last 6 weeks. It didn't even look like that. It looked like pencil drawings, and then it grew to colored things, and very, very interesting planning. We had all these conversations, and finally we hit on the right score. And I remember what I did. They were playing a particular old score from something, and I started listening to that, and I started timing everything to that and try to, okay, we can get something that's kind of like that, but it isn't that. And we went for that, and they loved it then.
Well, that's the blessing and the curse of temp music, right? I think is whenever you're working with having done more of that since.
They got so attached to it.
It's got you
them out of that.
It's there for a reason, right? Like it's like a demo. It's like the demo, getting attached to a demo. It's like that's their thing, and so you need to give them that, but different, or at least some of the form factor, at least of the arrangement, needs to resemble that for them to really dial in. And I didn't know that at the time. I don't think you knew that at the time, but that's the common battle that a lot of composers
And the final thing
composer
that
space.
happened in that, which is one of the most exciting highlights too, is we went to Skywalker Ranch,
Dude.
the biggest post facility in the United States, and the one everything goes through. And we were there for 3 days, and we actually recorded the orchestra
Orchestra. It was the
there.
San Francisco, I think, yeah, the orchestra
Yeah.
from San Francisco.
And it was just amazing. I mean, and here you are on it's if you don't know, the Skywalker Ranch is a 5,000 acre ranch that George Lucas owns, and it is unbelievable. You talk about technology, it's got everything. My favorite one was they invited me to go down to check out the what's the thing they make
The
sound?
Foley room? It was the Foley room, wasn't it?
Foley
Yeah, I
room,
remember.
gosh.
Oh, dude.
And it was so great. I love Foley, and watching them actually do it was amazing.
No, the place is crazy to get this. I mean, I know for some people this is probably normal, but to stay in the Skywalker Inn and drink the Skywalker wine and do the whole thing for 3 days was
unbelievable.
Yeah, you don't realize how special that is, and was pretty nuts. And so actually, what an interesting story from my side. Again, applying my kind of Adrian, what I gleaned from Adrian. And this is kind of another thing about my career, since I kind of started late. I was in my 30s before I ever met Adrian, before I did anything in the professional music industry, right? So I was always trying to find new paths to kind of move up quicker and get myself in interesting positions. And this is a good example of that. It was, so we had finished, we'd done recording, right? Finished recording the orchestra. We were staying, I think, at the Four Seasons that Pixar put us up in San Francisco, kind of in another visit that we had done. Not the sky. And anyway, so I was like, okay, the music's done. I got to contribute some stuff. I played some synth. I got to do some stuff on that. But man, I'd love to do something with the sound effects. Like, how cool would it be to be involved in the sound effects of this project? So I'm broke at this point. I have no money, but I booked myself an extra night at the Four Seasons. And I go down. I vividly remember this because these people thought I was crazy. I go down to the lobby, to the reception area of the Four Seasons, and I go up to the receptionist and I say, "Listen, can you help me? I don't have a car, but I need to get some things. I need 2 bottles of red wine. I need some Alka-Seltzer. I need some condoms, a rubber glove, and an extra trash can." And they thought I was the craziest person they'd ever met. So what I decided I was going to do is I go upstairs and I fill the trash can up with wine and drop Alka-Seltzer in it. I use the condoms and the rubber gloves to cover my microphones because I don't have any hydrophones. And I start underwater recording sound effects. So in Piper, there's a bird that goes underwater. And I was like, oh, it'd be cool to try Alka-Seltzer and pitch that down so there's these big bubbles as the waves and the surf moves. Because I wasn't a sound designer except doing stuff with Adrian. So I started recording this, and it actually started to work out and sound good. So I call Pixar and I'm like, is this something that you'd be interested in, right? And I pitched to Alan Barillo, the director of Piper, right? Yep. This all eventually won an Academy Award, by the way. I had mentioned, hey man, what else I think would be cool? Like, what if we recorded the orchestra underwater? Like, what if we did that, right? So he says, sure. And I was like, do you have a pool? And he's like, oh, Pixar has a pool. So I jump on in a cab and I head over to Pixar, and Alan and I get at a Pixar pool, and I get an underwater speaker. I go to Best Buy, right? In this cab, I buy a speaker that can go underwater. He's holding it in a net in the pool, and I have my condom microphones that I've got underwater. We start broadcasting the orchestra recorded at Skywalker underwater, so that when the bird goes underwater in the film, and also the stuff that we had done as well with the underwater scene, now it's actually being recorded underwater. So trying to then use that stuff in the film, and just doing whatever, man, like whatever kind of comes to mind, even if I don't have the right equipment. I called up the aquarium in San Francisco and they had hydrophones, but I didn't have enough time to get them. And it was just kind of making it up as you go along. Right. And I think that's something I would have never normally done. It just kind of came through.
I remember when you did
crazy.
that, I was thrilled with that. At the first they were asking me about doing the sound effects and stuff. And I said, I think that's kind of too much to take on.
Oh yeah.
But
we started to, if you remember,
the guy
early
who
days.
actually did him was brilliant. And he had a couple of synclaviers. He could do anything. He was great.
Ren Kleiss, one of the iconic sound designers, did the sound design for Flux.
Man, he's award winning. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's got Oscars and all this kind of stuff. That he was nuts. But the early days of this, they had actually asked if we wanted to do it. So you and I remember we went out and bought a bunch of different like dishwasher soap bottles, and we were trying to squeeze them and make bird sounds and do all that. We recorded all that stuff. We recorded, I think, your stomach growl. Adrian's stomach notoriously
we did.
growls.
We recorded my stomach growling, and it did it every day at 4 o'clock because in there's a scene where the bird's stomach growls, and they put my stomach in there. So yeah, I got a little sound effect part. I had a pair of tennis shoes at that moment that when I would walk across the floor, they go.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this.
And I said, well, there you go. We got our first bird. But it's a long distance from that to doing the actual real thing. I learned a lot about it.
Yeah, it was me as well, right? And then you go watch like somebody who's an actual master
experience.
at that. Yeah, it's like, okay, we were messing around, but he knows what he's doing.
Oh gosh, yeah, he was great. They were all great, and they're still friends, and I'd love to work with them again, but it doesn't happen that easily now. There's so many people looking for the same things to do. But we did win an Oscar.
Yeah, that to the surprise of everyone, I think. I remember telling my mom, I was like, yeah, I think this movie turned out pretty good. I think it maybe, who knows, maybe it'll win an Oscar. And of course,
they hadn't won one for 10 years.
Yeah, at that point, Pixar was going through a dry spell of Oscars. And
I was standing in my kitchen with my bass player. We were going on tour the next day, Julie Slick, and she was looking at her phone, and she said, I said, I don't think they show the short film awards. She said, well, wait a minute. It's coming. They're showing it right now. And we turned on the TV, which was in the next room, and there it was, and we won the award.
Yeah.
Within 1 minute, we had gone from, I don't think they show it, to winning it.
Yeah, it's the first week I'd moved to Los Angeles when that happened, and I was in LA at the time of the Grammys, and just on my in my house with no furniture and just running around like a freaking 2-year-old. I was so excited when that happened. Gosh. Actually, we had a question. This is just an interesting, funny question. Lars is asking, what's the sonic difference between wine and water when exposed to Alka-Seltzer? The sonic difference is that wine is more viscous than water. So I found that if you use wine, the bubbles, the way that it works, it takes more time for them to develop, and it's a deeper sort of a sound, if that makes any sense. So it ended up working better. That's why the wine thing over water, just and I can drink wine.
You were going to lower the pitch of them too, so
I was going to drop it way down, and so that seemed to work. Red wine, red wine seemed to work better.
Another question we should throw in here. I can hardly talk and see all this at the same time.
Yeah, anybody, please chime in on that side of things. So. No particular grape. I didn't get that specific, but so that was amazing, and it won the Academy Award. Crazy, Adrian, you went to the premiere of the film and all this kind of stuff, right? That's just what a wild calling card to have on that side of things.
It was a highlight of my life, honestly.
I don't know if I'll ever be able to top that.
Such an animation fan, all the way back to Bugs Bunny and all that cast of characters. It was a dream come true. Yeah, and then 2 days later, we were on tour. We went to breakfast with Saul Zanana and the band, Julie, and we were ordering, and the woman said to me, what would you like? And I said, I'd like 2 eggs over easy. And he stopped me and said, wait a minute, do you realize this man just won an Oscar? And she said, bacon or ham?
Right, didn't care, right? Exactly.
Whatever.
It's a good story. It's a good story to tell. Oh man. But yeah, so no, amazing. And that, for me, that opened up the door to Disney. I went on to work with Lander, which we'll talk about in a minute, but started doing mastering work and some mixing work for Disney, and did so much stuff for them. Like if you look on Disney Plus, probably 30% of the stuff that's on there I ended up mastering the soundtracks for, including a lot of Star Wars
stuff too.
Yeah. Oh God. I mean, so much of it. So I would have never done that. And so, this kind of to pivot. Okay. So we talked a lot of kind of the stuff that we have done, right, together. And Adrian obviously has had a massive career doing ridiculous stuff since pretty much day one.
Mostly ridiculous things.
Yes, mostly ridiculous things. It's a compliment, obviously. Looking at kind of, the Flux stuff I thought was interesting, right? Because it really tapped into where Adrian specifically, and then myself kind of vicariously, thought the industry could be headed. And a lot of that stuff has come to fruition. It led me into working. I remember we were the Flux apps we were talking with. We were at South by Southwest, and I'd never been to South by Southwest before. And we had a little booth, and we were presenting the apps, right? We were like demoing them for people that were coming by, if I remember correctly. And Adrian was speaking there. And this company, Lander, who I'd never heard of before in my entire life, came and asked us to go to dinner. So we both went out to dinner with this company, and they were presenting that, they had found me on LinkedIn when I first started using LinkedIn. But they were like, hey, we have this company based out of Montreal, and we want to automate the mastering process. And the idea behind this is that, like, mastering is expensive. Not everyone even knows what it is. And there's so much content has scaled so much with people being able to record at their homes that there's just no way to master all of that content with humans, and there's no budget. So we're going to, like, provide some tools that get people closer to something that would be awesome. And I was like, they were used to audio engineers throwing stones at them for even suggesting this, right? Because it was like, oh, it's going to take all of our jobs, and you hear this a lot, right? A lot of which sometimes that's founded. In this case, very much unfounded. So in my case, like, I was like, oh, it could sound better, but I don't hate the idea. And I think largely from working with Adrian is why I was so open to kind of these types of new technology, and I wasn't thinking about it in more of a closed, having an emotional, visceral reaction in a bad way to it. And that led to me. I've been with Lander now as the head of strategy and partnerships for that company for 10 years now almost. And we have, we went from a tiny little AI mastering company to the broadest creator tools platform in the music industry. We have 6+ million users, blah blah blah, right? Not a promotion for Lander, but it grew into this big crazy thing. But it was AI before anybody had been. I'd never heard about AI in music before, and now of course it's everywhere, for better and worse, right? We have generative AI, which is, we're trying to figure that stuff out legally, but workflow tools, it's become a very important thing. Actually, case in point, today I'm not in my studio. I'm actually in San Jose at the NVIDIA conference, right? Second biggest company in the world. And they have a conference here for 70,000 people. And today's the first day, this afternoon, that they've ever had a panel on music and AI. And I'm lucky enough to be one of the guests on that panel. And that's because of, what came out of us at South by Southwest 10 years ago, pitching these apps that were so future facing that people were like, oh shit, this is really cool. So
I knew you'd go far, my friend. I knew that.
Whatever. Yeah, look who's talking.
Yeah, because you changed my outlook on music too, because I learned so much about software and things that you don't normally deal with. The engineer kind of doing that usually, but once those doors kicked open during Flux, when we were trying to do so many things and have so many different attitudes in the music, and take it dimensionally different places and everything, that was when that door kicked open for me. I remember some of the stuff that you basically came up with me playing things was just amazing stuff. So
yeah,
technology has always been there, but to use it properly is not easy. I think people get lost in that and forget about the music, but we're better at it than that.
Yeah, and that's that really speaks. Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, it really speaks to, and you said something even before we jumped on the meeting about this, which is like, when it comes to AI tools right now, right? So everything is going to have we won't even be calling it AI, everybody, in a few years. It'll just be software that runs inside of other software. It's only called AI now because it's a branding thing. People are trying to raise money, all that kind of stuff, right? So the idea that it's all going to replace human artists, right? And that fans actually even want that, right? That the fans identify with artists, right? They want to know that there's a creative entity that they can kind of look at, aspire to be, appreciate behind that. But it really is about how you use those tools, right? And it's not about the tools themselves. And it doesn't matter if it's AI powered or not, right? And that's, again, something I learned from Aid. And that's, it's one interesting thing is I move forward and Lander moves forward, developing more tools that are focused on musicians, like not replacing them. I'm going to bug you for ideas around this stuff, right? Because like I've always been the tool that your ideas to kind of bring some of those ideas to life. And I'd love to continue that.
Well, that's the thing about AI. It's really I think for a lot of musicians and people who don't quite understand it as well, as general public even, it's kind of fearsome. It's like, wow, what can you do with it? Well, you can do probably everything with it. So just think about that for a minute. I mean, I was talking about right now, I'm in my studio right now. I could just say to AI, if I had it here, hey, I need a new drum track that, does this and does that. I want these sounds, remember to put in my favorite cymbal sound over here and do this and do that. Boom. That's just a small application, but I was also thinking about AI in visual aspects. Like right now, I'm doing a lot of touring, And the hard thing to do with touring has always been the visual part because it's expensive.
Right.
But you could have AI do the videos you want and then project them, and it wouldn't, cost anything. You just need a projector and AI, a screen, and AI would do all that.
Yeah,
That's
and what's interesting, yeah, that's what's fascinating about that is you could even, of course, and this exists now, take all of the art that you write. So if everybody doesn't know, Adrian is an awesome painter, right? So, and you've done digital captures of a lot of that art, right? And prints and things like that. You could take your repository of a gazillion pieces of artwork and your album covers, and you could train your own private model on that and images of you. And it's kind of what we did in Flux, right? Where there's a bunch of your paintings and pictures of you that were vectorized and kind of repurposed into digital art.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not now, but when I get back to the solo touring where I have a band that's playing my solo music. I have 28 solo records, not 20.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of music to choose from.
A few songs.
Right now I'm doing the King Crimson music catalog from the 80s. And, that's great. It's fantastic. We have the most wonderful band, Steve Vai, Danny Carey, Tony Levin, who was on the original records. It's incredible. Sooner or later, that one will have to stop, I guess, when everybody has to go back to all the other things they do, and including me. And maybe by then I'm going to try to get this AI stuff rolling out. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. And to circle back on something you mentioned earlier, this idea, what if you could just talk to your DAW and tell it that you want your drums with your favorite, this kind of cymbal sound from this or whatever. That is all, we're at the cusp of that now. People have done examples, training Ableton to work with an LLM, meaning you can speak to it and it will execute things. There have been some cloud-based DAWs that do that now. So if you, like something really basic would be like, if you how could I make my vocal sound better? Or how, I don't know how to do sidechain compression. You can type those things into your DAW, and not only will it present an answer to that, like what is coming now is it'll actually just give you the channel strip that you drag in or the plugin chain or whatever, right? As DAWs become more intelligent, and I'm a founder of a cloud-based DAW because that's where the GPUs live right now. If you're going to do AI stuff natively, cloud is where to do it for DAWs, at least for the moment. There's a lot of cool innovation. So the exact description you just said is something that people have been experimenting with, and in the next 18 months will be a thing, right? And I noticed there was a comment about
exciting.
How, oh, dude, it's crazy. And I think when people think of AI, right, you have to think very broadly about it, right? There is the generative AI component, and somebody brought this up, I mentioned as a question, which is like, I can see how it works for mastering, because that's more of a workflow. I mean, mastering is creative, but it's not the same as composing a song, right, or producing a song. But maybe it's not so good for the creative side of things. It 100% is, right? I mean, it's no different than using, I mean, we use tools to randomly generate melodies or randomly edit something or randomly, generate sound effects in Ableton and stuff. And you're curating through things to help you get to a place, right? And all that matters is you get to a place that inspires you and resonates with you. It doesn't matter how you got there, but you're the one that is, I always say this in my talks, curation is creation. It is a form of creation, right? So if you're able to curate, even if you don't have the technical ability to do something, if there is a tool that guides you, but you're ultimately the one that says, this is done, I like this. If you have taste and you can impart that taste, and everybody can, and this is one of the things that scares people about AI, is that it does allow everyone to potentially be creative if they can select things without needing to know an instrument or something like that. And I understand that. But that's where we're at. It's taken from DJ culture, right? If you can curate a bunch of albums that you didn't necessarily create yourself or produce, but you can present those in a way that engages an audience, you're looked at as a creative, right? And this is very similar to that, but it's now moved into the music production process. So we're really figuring out how all that's going to work, what the tools look like that creators actually want versus just, creating music and not having any agency over it, which no one really gives a crap about. But anyway, it's a lot of what I speak about, and a lot of what I'm navigating now with Lander is how that's gonna work. And anybody who says it won't help everybody be creative, yeah, but it's really going to help people who are creative be more creative, right? And that's kind of where this is going to end up being. People who, not everybody wants to be creative, right? Not to go on a tangent on this. Not everybody wants to be an artist. A lot of companies that are founded in the AI space by people who aren't in the music industry, who are from ex-Google people or whatever, they come in just thinking every fan wants to be an artist. So we're going to have this total addressable market of the entire world, and no one wants that, right? people want artists. They want some separation with their fandom and art. And I think, yeah, long story short, you have some misconceptions about what people appreciate in music, and you see a lot of engineers and developers that don't understand that, trying to enter our space and doing it wrong. So I've always been proud to be, part of a company that's doing it right, because it's all musicians and cats like myself. And again, we're taking the Belew legacy
on. Anything that really helps you present the music in better ways.
Yeah.
And anything that propels your creativity. That's been my whole life. I think my mind is just kind of wired wrong, and I don't know if AI will be wired the same way. So maybe I've got a chance.
Yeah, I see another comment that AI will always be rear facing because it's training on, has to be, AI is dumb, really, right? It's got to be trained on existing material to then attempt to come up with something that in theory is not new, because it was trained on previous, existing material, but it actually comes up with stuff that no human has ever created before, right? I think that's another misconception about AI. It can create genres that we've never done before, right? It can do stuff like that. Is it going to invent a melody that never existed? It's actually possible, right? I think people tend to not think about it for what it actually is. And guess what? Most of us, like, an excuse, and last thing I'll say in AI, I do panels and people will be like, AI will never sound as good as the Beatles, right? It will never compose a song that is good as the best Beatles song. And I'm like, probably not. But like, who else? Which one of us has ever done that, right? Like, how many artists are composing music as good as the Beatles? If you set the bar, as people tend to do when they want to dismiss technology, so high, the reality is it solves a lot of other things that aren't necessarily that, right? And how many humans are making what is effectively derivative music? AI potentially gets them outside of that box and opens up their palette to things, in genres that they're not familiar with. And that's how you use it, right? You don't use it to just do that shit for you. You use it to kind of be a collaborator and help you out and blah, 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 blah. So we're going to see, right? This is all just, speculative on my part, but I kind of try to be the guy on that side of things. So AI discussion over. Adrian, we only have a few more minutes, man. So I want to ask, what's going on now? You mentioned the Beat Tour. Like, when are you guys back out on the road? What's going on with that?
We start late April, I think maybe the 22nd, and we do South America, 9 shows there in 5 or 6 in 6 countries.
Wow.
One of them is, they're selling out well. One's a 9,000 seat place. That's pretty big for us, and it's already sold out. So that's going to be a great tour. I get back from that into LA, and there's really actually not time enough for me to come home. It's strange because I've got to directly go right on over a day or two later to Stockholm. And there I start a tour with what I do with Jerry Harrison, Remain in Light band, an 11-piece band that's really wonderful. Cool. It has Julie Slick as the bass player. And we are playing 18 shows around Europe. So after that, I get back and I'm going to start getting back into making new music in the studio. I've got a lot of irons in the fire already, but because I've done so much live touring recently, I haven't been able to focus on that. That'll be next.
Yeah. Are you ever going to, like, slowing down is just not, man, in your vocabulary? You work, yeah, it's wild, man.
Well, I feel great and I can do this. I feel good about doing it. And I love my fans. And I know I'll do it as long as I can. That's, what else? When I'm home like I am right now, I kind of like, I need to do things.
Yeah, I remember, if we didn't talk about this, but I actually lived in Adrian's house in the studio. There's a part, the Fripp Suite, the Robert Fripp Suite is the guest room attached. You can't see attached to the studio. And I lived there for years. I was in Adrian's house because we were touring so much and I was working there so much. I was like, why have another apartment? So I moved in and probably for 5 years lived in your studio because you're constantly working, right? So it was like you're constantly coming up with ideas. So it actually worked better.
That's how Flux became as good as it is, because we put so many hours for years into that one thing. If you go through it, there's a lot of stuff in there. So you really, truly never will hear it played out the same way.
Yeah. And actually David mentions this. He's like, more Flux, but bring back Flux to the App Store, because these 2 apps right now are not available because Adrian and I's careers just went crazy in different directions. And we kind of let that lay dormant. So I think on the agenda is to get those guys back up and running because they're,
It breaks
you know,
my
again,
heart, honestly. There's so
yeah,
much to this idea, and there's so much work we already put in, and I'd like to get back to that. Because you know what it did for me as an artist? I could think up anything and just put it in there and it worked. And it was
yeah,
just wonderful not to have to wait so long to fruition of an idea. So
yeah.
especially if you got an engineer living in your house.
Right. But it is interesting, right? We all kind of all pushed into this box in a lot of ways, especially in popular music of like, okay, you need to have a song, it needs to be this long, there needs to be a chorus, there needs to be a verse. And not everyone, we don't always have to follow that, obviously, but it is a thing, right? So like the idea that you just have a guitar riff and that's it. That's all you want to do. I don't want to put drums to it. I just want it to live on its own. Like that's it's hard for that to exist somewhere independently, right? Unless it's in something like
And
this. So
sometimes, I would want to put something in there. This is the basic thing without all the adornments. And I think
yep.
people do like that too sometimes. They like to hear where it came from, but not it completed. Anyway, we did all
Yeah.
that long
Well,
time ago.
yeah, and it's one of those things that feels, especially now with what's the hot button stuff in the industry, it feels as fresh now as it did then. So if anybody's, I'm going to dig up some developers, but if anybody knows mobile app guys, let me know, and that'll
Yeah.
be something they'll be
Do we
back on
take on some of
Sure.
these questions?
Let's
I'd like,
see.
as a fan, I'd like to
Tom.
ask one. You both have worked with legends, right? I mean, Daniel, your story about Pixar was
Yep.
smartest people in the room gold. I can't thank you enough for sharing that. Who would you like to work with? I mean, you both could pretty much sounds like work with anyone you choose. Who would you like
I
to?
know Adrian's answer. I know yours already.
Yeah, it's not, my answer is kind of boring really by now.
Oh, come on. We talked about this band earlier.
I'd like to work with Daniel again.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, that's cheating. That's not,
Yeah,
that's, yeah.
I would. You know,
Who is
I
it? Adrian?
I always think that the things that affected me most, and maybe this is true for most people, is when you're young, the music you listen to when you're really young affected you, really impacted you. So that's the Beatles for me, and all the people connected in that area, the Kinks and many other people. I'd like to do something with any of those people related with that era, but it's kind of closing down because it's not long for everybody can't live forever, but that is the stuff that affected me most. I could get more creative with it, but the truth is I find myself right now so busy. It's not first in my mind, who do I need to work with? What I'm thinking about mostly is what I'm doing and how to move forward beyond that.
Yeah.
Daniel,
It's
how
a good,
about you?
It's a good question. I'm gonna be even more nebulous in my answer than Adrian was, right? Which is somebody asked, I was talking earlier this week with somebody about this, right? We were talking about, okay, who would you work with? Like what project would you think would be really interesting? And we both couldn't come up with anything, right? Because it was really more, and this is a lame answer, but it was more about something where I can contribute and be creative on something. And it was less at the stage of my career. I've gotten to work with so many of my idols that I grew up with, right? That I grew up at, looking at and listening to. Like it's just I've been so lucky in that regard that I don't really have a lot of people I could say, but it's more about what I can contribute, right? So it's more about like the output of it than it is about who it's attached to. Weird as that is, but I literally just don't even think about it anymore. So yeah, just and honestly, where I'm at now in my career is I do less music. Adrian was the height of my music production. I do so much more mixing and mastering these days. I do a lot of Atmos work. I've gotten to do a lot of new artists, a lot of, every Jason Derulo. I got to do Keith Richards. I got to do Nina Simone, some very, very cool projects. And so I get to work with artists that aren't even around anymore sometimes on that side of things when I work on some of this legacy catalog stuff, which is awesome. But I kind of treat working on music technology the way I used to treat producing music, right? Where that's my new realm of production. So I transparently am more excited about the tools that through the amazing developers that Lander has and et cetera, get to ideate and bring to market the way that I used to work on music. And that's kind of where a lot of my creative juice is in that space. And a lot of it's and I know I already said this, like, how can we as creators responsibly shepherd intelligent tools towards things that empower creators, right? And like that's where I'm like holding that line in the sand and not letting other people come into our space and fuck things up is where my passions lie these days. So that's why again it's hard for me to answer that because that's what I'm looking at.
I would add to my answer that, now I'm at a certain age where I want to create my legacy, do as much as I can for what I've got in me, get that out rather than try to play with other people or work with
Yep.
other people. But I love touring still, and I'm working with great people every time I go out. So
Yeah, you think it's pretty good. Well, cool. I mean, so Tom, yeah, that was, I think that might be a good place to wrap up unless anybody has anything else to ask. It was really awesome yeah, to get to chat with everybody and answer some questions. And Tom, we really appreciate you inviting us on the podcast. Obviously been a fan of this for a long time, so I'm so happy to participate.
yeah, thank you so much. This has been fun. It's different for me.
Well, I appreciate you doing it. I selfishly have two requests, one for each of you. Daniel, since you're at the NVIDIA conference, I'd love for you to get Jensen Wong to get the stock back up over 150.
Well, blame DeepSeek for that. Like yeah, I'm sure.
And
I'll work on that.
Adrian, for you, I went to the Stop Making Sense concert for the Talking Heads in 1983, and it changed my life. Could you do whatever you got to do to get those guys back together, please?
I'm telling you, I mean, I think Jerry has tried a lot and he's closer to them than I am. And it just seems David Byrne just doesn't want to do it and he doesn't have to.
I
And
know.
I respect that, but I would love to be a part of it if they ever do it, because I really enjoyed playing with that band. It felt so natural to me. And you can probably tell if you listen to Remain in Light that anything they put on up on the board, I was ready and okay, add something to it. Great. It's fun.
Couldn't
A
agree
little like
more.
my work with Trent Reznor was that way too. Every time I would go work on one of his records. The music was just so fun for me to play to. It was kind of freeing. So, but you never know what'll happen there.
Well, don't give up the ghost. Keep working on both of it. Gentlemen, thank you for everything you've done already in your legendary careers. Keep doing it. To the audience, I promised you you'd leave today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. I guarantee you we delivered on that. We'll be back here next week with two more incredibly smart and dialed in music executives. Between now and then, be nice to each other and enjoy March Madness. See you soon, folks.
Nice. Peace, everybody.
Thank you guys.